The Ohio Shakespeare Quarantine Radio Program starts now. Good evening, everyone. I'm your host, Avon Corto, and welcome to the Ohio Shakespeare Quarantine Radio Program, where we produce original works based on classic stories for your at-home entertainment. So grab your quarantine pal, your favorite adult beverage, or maybe a glass of chocolatey Ovaltine for the kiddos, and settle in for some old-fashioned radio play spookums. Tonight's transformative tale is based on an 18th century folk legend, compiled and edited by Ian Fellows Gordon and John Canning, adapted for our radio program by Nancy Cates. It is sure to remind us that a joyride for some may be terror-filled for others. Joining us tonight from the Ohio Shakespeare Festival Company are Tom Barnes as the narrator, Terry Burglar as Mr. Anders and the blacksmith, James Rankin as Charlie, Ryan Zarecki as Jim, and Karen Wood as Mrs. Anders. You know, after a long day in the shop and a hearty supper, it's always a good idea to have a long, hot soak. Our friends at the Macbeth can help with that.
Gee, Mabel, my hands are so dry and cracked from all of this hand washing, but yours look so soft. What's your secret?
Well, it's no secret, Elma. I use the Macbeth goat's milk soap. Yes, that's right, the Macbeth. It's like Macbeth, but except this one actually gets that damn spot out. That creamy soap with goat's milk and shea butter gets my hands nice and clean without drying them out.
Wow, Mabel, that sure sounds swell. But you know, I enjoy an added element of whimsy in the lavatory. Washing my hands 10 times a day can make me feel like a real drip.
But Elma, each bar of creamy soap is stamped with a quotation from your favorite books. The Macbeth has soaps with quotes from Shakespeare, Jane Austen, Sherlock Holmes, and more. Plus other great products like lotion, face masks, and tinted lip balms to add a little zing to your jitterbug.
Well, Mabel, that sounds like a real humdinger. Where can I get these marvelous soaps?
They come directly to you via the Postal Mail Service. The information is coming through the telegraph now. Just give me a moment to translate this Morse code. Just tell your operator to connect you to www.themacbeth.com. That's THEMACBATH.com.
That's a mighty funny address. Doesn't even have a street name.
It's newfangled. I think you're supposed to yell it from your front porch.
Well, I think I've got it. The Macbeth Goat's Milk Soap.
Keeping your skin soft and clean with a touch of whimsy. Try it today.
Mabel and Elba have assured me that their soaps may have certain protective properties. Maybe the boys in tonight's story need to see about buying some. And now, Ohio Shakespeare Festival presents The Legend of the Witch Horse.
Back in the days when our country was young, many well-confirmed tales of the supernatural have as their setting the extreme north of the land. From this, one is inclined toward the theory that occult and supernatural beings prefer the wild coastal settings of our rough new nation. Be that as it may, the following events have been told so often and are so firmly established in local lore that many New Englanders believe wholeheartedly in their reality. Tonight's story is as true as the brave tales of heroes and battles during our war for independence. And so, the legend of Witch Horse begins on an autumn evening in the year 1790. Two brothers, brand new apprentices to the town's master woodcarver, Mr. Anders, are just finishing their supper.
Now then, lads. Now, that was a fine long day in the shop, and your work is much improved. Now finish this good hearty supper Mrs. Anders has made for us. Give him another slice of that pie, my dear, and fill their cups with ale. These are two hungry men.
Thank you, Mrs. Anders.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Anders, these boys will eat us out of house and home if you let them. We shall have nothing left for ourselves.
Oh, nonsense. You and I are quite, shall we say, prosperous in our appearance, are we not? We can't have our two apprentices looking like underfed scarecrows. How would that seem to the neighbors? Here, wrap up what's left of that bread and a hunk of cheese for them to take up to bed with them.
They're a rum pair, those two. There's no need to treat them like young princes. They've had more than enough already.
Must we go up, Mr. Anders? Couldn't we have a game of cards or something?
Charlie, you'll quickly learn that a man must have 8 hours between the blankets in order to do his day's labor.
But it's only 9, and I'm not the least bit tired.
If any fellow needs rest, Charlie, it's you. You've had black shadows under both your eyes for days now, and you're looking quite pale and drawn. Jim, now take your brother along and make sure he turns in.
Yes, sir. Come on, Charlie.
And don't come sneaking down into my kitchen during the night and helping yourselves to more food.
Oh, please, Mrs. Anders. Good night, boys.
Good night, Mr. Anders.
Good night, ma'am.
And so Jim and Charlie headed up to their room in the attic.
I still don't see why we're sent up to bed like a couple of children.
Never mind, Charlie. I think Mr. Anders knows what's best for us. And in a year or two, we'll be our own masters, able to get to bed when we want.
I suppose so. But I don't want to sleep.
What? Why not?
Just not here.
Why on earth not? We have the whole attic all to ourselves, and the beds are cozy and comfortable.
I mean, not here in the Anders house.
You're not making any sense.
It's just that, well, I have terrible dreams lately, Jim.
Tell me.
No, it's nothing.
No, you must tell me. Mr. Anders is right. You look like the very devil, and you're white as a sheet. Now, what are these dreams you're having?
Never mind. Maybe after tonight, if I have the same dream again, I'll tell you about it.
The same dream? What, do you always have the same one?
Yes?
But you've got to tell me now. The dreams are exactly the same.
Not exactly, but almost. And they're awful.
Oh, hey now. Well, there's nothing to fear. Am I not your brother? Older and stronger and bound to protect you?
I wouldn't say you're stronger.
Oh, you wouldn't, huh? Come on, no, say uncle.
Say it, uncle, uncle. I'm sorry. I'm just being a crybaby.
No, you're not. We all get to cry a little now and then. Now, I'm going to sit up with you to make sure no dreams come tonight. But you mark my words. If you're like this tomorrow morning, I'm sending Mr. Anders to fetch the doctor. He'll give you some medicine that'll put you right.
And so Charlie tried to sleep and tossed and turned until he finally drifted off, with Jim keeping guard. But as the dark minutes slipped by, and as he'd had a long day's work and a great hearty dinner, Jim fell into a deep slumber.
Charlie! Charlie, wake up!
What? Jim, is she gone?
Who? Is who gone?
What is it? What's the matter? Is someone hurt?
No.
It's all right, Mr. Anders, sir. Charlie here just had a nightmare.
Well, it must have been quite the dream, lad, to make you yell out like that.
I haven't been sleeping very well these last few nights.
Are you ill, Charlie, my boy? Oh, did you have too much to eat and it gave you bad dreams, huh?
Maybe so, sir.
Or maybe you're homesick. I could always send you home to your parents for a few days if you thought that
I don't
might
think
help.
it's homesickness, Mr. Anders.
I'll look out for him, sir. He'll be fine.
Well, I hope so. I mean, of course he will, of course. Well, then, good night. Oh, good morning, really.
Good night, sir. Thank you, sir.
Good night.
Come on now. I'm going to hear all about this dream, every bit.
You wouldn't believe it.
That's for me to judge.
All right, then. Well, it happens just the same way every night. I don't even know whether I'm awake or asleep when it happens.
When what happens?
You see, this bed of mine is nearer the door than yours is. Every night, a horrible old woman, a witch, comes in that door. No, she comes through that door and makes straight for my bed.
Why, it must be Mrs. Anders looking for her bread and cheese. No, I'm sorry. Go on. What does she look like?
She's as big around as she is tall. And she seems to be dressed in brown and black robes and a cape, though it's hard to see, really. And her long, sort of gray, black hair, it's piled on her head into two twists. It reminds me of someone around these parts, but I just can't remember exactly. But she's terribly strong, and she grabs me by the neck so tight I can't possibly call out or do anything. Then she holds up her other hand, and there's a bridle in it, and then she slips the bridle right over my head.
Slips a bridle over your head?
Yes! With the bit between my teeth. Jim, she's so strong. I can't possibly stop her. She drags me out of my bed and climbs on my back, and in spite of her size and strength, she weighs hardly anything at all. Then she kicks me on either side, just like you kick a horse. And we go around the end of your bed, me carrying her on my back. Then she forces me through the window, and even though we're way up in the air, we don't fall. She seems to get me flying and turns me into a sort of flying horse. And out we go, her riding on my back.
And you both fly?
Somehow. It's galloping or flying or somehow both at once.
So you're turned into a horse then?
No, my arms and legs move like a horse without me doing it, yet I still look like me.
Where do you go?
Well, I can't say exactly where. But after about an hour of flying over the town and the roads and the fields, we head deep into the forest. Everything goes black as pitch. The trees are so tall and thick, and even the starlight and moonlight disappear. Finally, there's a little glow in the distance, and the witch heads me towards it, and there's a circle of trees around a clearing, and a huge fire is burning in the center. There are other witches there. I think it must be a whole coven. It's just outside the circle. She makes me land. She climbs off my back. She drags me by the bridle to a rotting stump of a tree, and then she leaves me there. I can't move. In the shadows from the fire, I can see other fellows far off, and they're all tied up like me. The witch starts to babble and cackle with the other witches in a language I can't understand. Something foul is always being cooked.
What is it?
I don't know. I don't like to think about it.
Well, you never eat any of it, do you?
No, but she does, and it smells worse than you could ever imagine. They chant and wail, and it's enough to turn your blood to ice. But just before dawn, she comes back, unties me from the post, gets on my back,
Get moving, horse.
kicks me in the ribs, and we take off, sailing over the woods and fields and down the streets until we're here again, in through the window. Then she gets off and leads me past the end of your bed, drags me into my own, takes off my bridle, and then
Yes?
she kisses me. I think that's the worst part of all. She kisses me, and then she goes out straight through the closed door. Oh, Jim, it's horrible. It really is.
Indeed, it must have been. Jim knew the ring of truth in his brother's voice, and he could feel his own heart beating faster at the horror of it.
All right. There's only one thing to do. Charlie, we shall change beds tonight. I'll lie in wait for this witch, and if she appears, I'll think of some way to capture her or fight her off or something.
No.
That's the plan. I don't want to hear any more about it. Now, come on, let's go downstairs.
Take some breakfast now, boys. Can't work on empty stomachs.
It will be a cold day down below when that ever happens.
Are you feeling a little better then, Charlie?
Yes, sir. I think so.
He'll be right as rain by tomorrow.
So, as arranged that night, the brothers swapped beds. Charlie climbed into the one furthest from the door, and to Jim's satisfaction soon fell fast asleep. As he lay in the darkness, Jim prepared his plan.
When the witch grabbed Charlie by the neck, he said it took all his strength away, so I won't have much of a chance against her then. But once she puts the bridle on...
Jim thought briefly how unpleasant it would feel to have a bit between his teeth.
Ugh. But after she puts the bridle on, Charlie says she controls him even though she has no weight. Maybe then...
Just as Jim was getting a glimmer of an idea, he saw a shimmering at the door, and as he watched, The shadow of an old hag passed through the heavy wood as if it were no more than air. She wore a shapeless bag of a dress with a short black cape at her back, and her hair was wildly twisted into 2 mounds on top of her head, just as Charlie had said. Jim pulled the covers over his head and pretended to be asleep.
Boy, we have travels abroad. Now, out the window and fly!
As they galloped through the night air, the witch on Jim's back, his thoughts raced.
I still have arms and legs, but I can gallop through the air with the strength and speed of the finest horse in the county. She controls me with no effort, and in spite of her size, she's so light that on my back.
And then Jim knew what he had to do. He sped up to his fastest gallop, then stopped short, rearing as high as he could, bucking wildly to throw the witch from his back.
No!
With one arm, Jim reached up and yanked the weightless witch off his back, and with his other arm, he pulled the bridle off his head and slammed the bit into the witch's mouth.
Ah!
Ha! That fits rather well.
Jim held the bridle tight as he climbed on the witch's back.
Get moving. Tonight it's my turn to ride, and I want to go fast.
And he kicked the witch in her fat sides with his heels.
We've a long journey, and the fields and forests will be fine and misty and wonderful tonight. Now take me where you go every night, and if you don't go fast enough, I'll just kick you till you do. Nyah! Come on now. I want to be back in my bed by dawn.
They sailed out of the town over broad meadows and crop fields, and finally above the trees of the deep black forest.
There's a clearing ahead, and I see a bonfire in the middle. Is this your meeting place, witch?
Jim jerked on the bridle, slowing their flight, and forcing the witch horse to descend until she reached the ground by the very rotting stump Charlie had described.
You cool your heels here, old girl, while I see about those other fellows hitched in the trees.
After he harnessed the witch securely, Jim slipped through the shadows of the night and the firelight and removed the bridle from the closest young man, gesturing for him to remain silent and free the others. Then he returned to his steed.
Come on, old girl. One more task for tonight.
As he mounted the witch's back, he made her fly low over the rancid cauldron. And with a roar, he upset it, spilling the contents into the fire and over the ground where it hissed and burned and dissolved into sulphurous smoke.
Now home!
And as they rose again into the night sky, Jim had a glimpse of the witches running like demons towards the safety of the dark woods, having found their horse prisoners escaped and long gone. Just as they approached the town, daybreak began to turn the sky from black to gray. To Jim's surprise, the old woman began to descend above the trees to ground level.
Must it be dark for you to fly? Does that power leave you at dawn, or do you just not want to be seen?
As they galloped now on solid ground, the witch slowly began to take on the shape of a real horse. First, her strange hair, divided on the top of her head, became horse's ears. Her short cloak changed slowly into a long black mane. And when he looked down, he could see her short fat fingers and her shapeless shoes becoming horse's hooves.
Are you a real horse now, old girl? I wonder if you'll have to stay this way. Shall I have my own fine horse as a prize from this night?
But having gone less than half a mile, Jim noticed that his steed was limping, and the galloping eased into a canter, then a walk. Jim dismounted to inspect, holding carefully to the reins.
It's as I thought. Your shoes are completely worn through, old girl. If I'm to get home, I must find a blacksmith to give you some new ones.
As luck would have it, not 100 yards ahead, he found an early rising blacksmith at his bellows.
Would you shoe my horse for me? We've come a long way and she's lame.
Aye, I'll do that for you.
Well, thank you very much. It's kind of you at this hour of the morning.
Oh, it's all right. Money's money, whether the sun shines or the moon. You have got money, haven't you? You look like you just scrambled out of bed in your nightdress.
For the first time, Jim realized how odd his attire must have seemed to the blacksmith.
Oh, No, this is the way I like to ride at night. More freedom. And they're not really night clothes, of course. At any rate, I have money. My purse is always safely around my neck on this cord.
Jim handed coins to the blacksmith, who set right about his work.
Oh, these shoes have worn fair away. You'll not get much further with the likes of these. I've never seen such shoes. Not even slippers they ain't.
So as light just began to glimmer to the far east, Jim mounted the newly shod witch horse and rode back to the Anders house.
I suspect you can't fly me in the window, so I'll leave you here.
Jim tethered the horse to a post behind the house and slipped up to his attic room just as Charlie awakened.
Oh, Jim, what a wonderful night. I slept all through and not a single dream.
I think your dreaming days are over now.
What do you mean?
Before Jim could answer, a terrible commotion rose downstairs.
Oh, for the love of God! Jim! Charlie! Go fetch the doctor, quick!
What's wrong?
What's happened?
Mrs. Anders is in the yard screaming her head off. The most horrible thing has happened.
What is it?
What's the matter?
I don't know how or why, but she has horseshoes nailed to both hands and both feet.
This concludes tonight's broadcast of The Legend of the Witch Horse, adapted for our radio production by Nancy Cates from a classic 18th century folk legend. We would also like to recognize Technical Director Buddy Taylor, Managing Director Tess Bergler, and Trevor Buda for writing and creating the original theme music for the Quarantine Radio program. Ohio Shakespeare is dedicated to creating these all-original classic radio plays throughout the remainder of 2020. Look for them live on our Facebook page each month. You can also listen to them at any time thereafter on our website at www.ohioshakespeare.com. These radio plays will remain free to the public, and Ohio Shakespeare will continue to pay our collaborating artists. If you would like to support these efforts, please consider joining our Patreon. All monies raised on our Patreon platform go right back into paying local actors and playwrights to produce these all-original radio productions. Visit www.patreon.com/OhioShakes. That's www.patreon.com/OhioShakes. Thank you for joining us this evening. Tune in next time for another classic story. Until then, this is Avon Quarto saying good night.